What's up, everyone? Big Country 7914 here. Today's video, we're going to do something a little different. We tend to usually do NHL 20 videos, or we did that one Madden video. That was fun. But we're actually going to talk about real hockey. NHL season starts up tonight. We're going to do a lot of real NHL hockey talk. As you see on my stream, we talk a lot of real hockey, not just the video game hockey, but we talk real hockey as well. I stream over on Twitch every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday nights, starting around 7 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure you go over to twitch.tv, Big Country 7914. Make sure you go give me a follow and turn the notifications on, so every time we go live, you get that alert that we are now live. You can also follow me over on Twitter and Instagram at big_country 7914. And we also have a wonderful Discord community called the Shoot Score Happy Community. So you can also join that. I'll put the links below for everything below. But let's get into today's video. So we're going to go through all 31 teams in the NHL and see who is in and who is out before the season even starts. For what they did for transactions in the offseason, for what we've been able to see during preseason games so far. So we're going to get into that and kind of just go team by team, give a little my personal thoughts of why they would be in and why they would be out, and we'll go from there. Team number 1, Anaheim Ducks. Right now I say they're out. They got a new coach in Dallas Eakin. He's been the coach of the San Diego Gulls, which, if you don't know who the San Diego Gulls are, it is the Anaheim Ducks AHL team. He's been their coach for the last 4 seasons. He just got hired as the franchise's 10th coach, I believe. And he will take over. This will be his first year as head coach in the NHL. A lot of the members of the Anaheim roster now, he's coached up over the years. Not too sure what that illness is. And John Gibson got hurt in the last game of the preseason against the Arizona Coyotes. So he is expected to miss the beginning of the season. Ryan Miller is going to get the start and goal to start the season, with Gibson being sidelined right now. I think they got a great goaltending duo between Gibson and Miller, but I just don't think they got the pieces right now that's going to be able to push them to be a playoff team this year. I think they're moving in the right direction, hiring Dallas Eakin as their head coach. We've seen it before with AHL coaches that step up and take the NHL job. Teams tend to move in the right direction. You saw that in Boston with Bruce Cassidy taking over for Claude Julien. He kind of turned that team around, gave them a new identity, in which went on a nice run to make the playoffs. And then obviously last year you saw them lose in the Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. But I think they're moving in the right direction with getting Eakin as their head coach. So they're out for me right now, but doesn't mean that in a couple years that they will be a playoff contending team once again. My second team on the list, Arizona Coyotes. And right now, they are in for me. They just missed the playoffs last year. The Arizona Coyotes were the first team looking in that did not make the playoffs last year. I think they just missed by 3 points, if I'm not mistaken. This is just going off of memory. But they just missed out. But they've done some work in the offseason. They added Phil Kessel by trading Galchenyuk to Pittsburgh to get Kessel. We've seen Kessel over the years. He is a true goal scorer. If he can continue to be putting up the points that he has been over his career and bring that to Arizona, bring it to the desert and continue scoring, I think that's going to really help them move in the direction to be a playoff team. Right now, I got them as like a wild card, maybe the second wild card being, but I got them in as a playoff team. They also added Carl Soderberg, who is a good depth bottom six player that will help round out that offense. And they got a young top prospect in Barrett Hayton, who their talks are that he could be, he could crack the starting roster on day one. So keep an eye out for him. And then their goaltending duo between Ranta and Kemper. If they can have an even split between those two goalies and keep both those goalies healthy throughout the year, that will be the key to the Arizona Coyotes making it to the playoffs. If you all remember at the beginning of last year, Ranta got hurt. Kemper stepped in and had a very good season last year. But if he can continue that over to this year and have Ranta also be healthy and they can have that even split, probably Ranta, 60% of the games and Kemper with like 40% of the games, that would be good for the Coyotes to stay healthy through the season and to go into the playoffs. Team number 3, my Boston Bruins. We all remember what happened. They lost in Game 7 to the St. Louis Blues, but the Bruins, I feel like they're going to come back hungry. You have a lot of veteran players on that team who have now been part of 2 Stanley Cup defeats that are going to be hungry for that next cup. Now they got 2 Stanley Cup losses in the time that they've won one, so they're going to want to get back there and win it. I know it's very difficult for a team to get back to the Stanley Cup after losing or even winning. To go back-to-back is even more difficult. We'll talk about that later when we get to the St. Louis Blues. But for the Bruins, they're definitely a playoff team. They are in the playoffs. Do I have them winning it this year? No. I don't, as much as I want to see them, but I will tell you later on who my dark horse is to win the Stanley Cup. But as of right now, the Bruins are a playoff team. They'll probably be a second or third round exit, depending on who matches up with who. I think they'll probably be the third team in the division. They definitely will be above. They won't be a wild card. They'll be a divisional finish, but they're in. They lost Marcus Johansson. They lost Noel Acciari. Mojo went to Buffalo. Acciari went to the Panthers. They added Richie from Dallas. But the big question marks for the Bruins are if their younger prospects can come up and step in. We saw Carson Kuhlman step in the playoffs. If he can solidify that second line winger spot next to Brusk and Krejci, that could help them. And then also Anders Bjork, he's been hurt the last couple of years. If he can stay healthy and maybe crack the squad and be a top prospect that he was touted out to be coming out of Notre Dame, that would be huge for the Bruins. And also the question marks around David Backes. He's been doing a lot of work in the offseason, but can he sustain that through the year? And will he be able to have a solid role in the lineup there in Boston? But for right now, Bruins in. Next on the list is the Buffalo Sabres, and the Sabres are out for me. I know they added a couple good pieces. They got Jimmy Vesey, like I just said. They got Marcus Johansson. They got Colin Miller from the Golden Knights. I think they picked up Montour over by the trade deadline from Anaheim. They also picked up Yakaharo from Chicago in a trade for Nylander. But they're big question marks for me. I mean, I know they got Jack Eichel and Skinner re-signed there, and they got some pieces. They got Kyle Okposo. They got Rasmus Dahlin. I mean, they got names. They got the names, but can they put it together? But their biggest question mark for me, the reason why they're not going to be a playoff team, is their goaltending. I don't think Hutton and Olmark are good enough goaltenders, even as a duo, to move them to be a playoff team. We saw it after they had that such strong start last year at the beginning of the 18-19 season. Their goaltending really hurt them towards the end, which is what where they eventually fell off and ended up being the worst team in the NHL for the second half or the last third of the season. So their goaltending is tough. They got a young good goaltending prospect. I'm gonna butcher this name, Luka Nanonen, Lukakonen, or something like that. He's supposed to be a great young prospect, but we'll see if he can even, the years coming down, will be able to bring Buffalo Sabres to the playoffs. But right now, Sabres are out. Maybe in a couple of years, if their young prospects can step up, or if they can get another goaltender in the mix to be, to push them that extra level, that extra mark to get them in the playoffs. But as of right now, Sabres are out. Next on my list, Calgary Flames. They were one of the better teams in the West last year. I got them as in. They had a couple trades in the offseason. They traded James Neal from Milan Lucic from Edmonton, along with they traded Mike Smith for Cam Talbot. The Flames traded Mike Smith for Cam Talbot, which I think them trading Smith away was a mistake. Smith was the stronger goaltender towards the end, but it shows me that the Flames are all in Richter to be their starting goaltender and Talbot to be the backup / split time with him. Lucic, I would like to see him have a good year in Calgary. Maybe put him on a line with Tkachuk and good Johnny Hockey or even Monahan. Maybe he can get a couple apples or even get a couple tucks, playing on the line with those guys. I mean, Lucic is a big body, and hopefully he can get to those dirty areas for those and open up more space for those little younger, quicker players to get more points throughout the year. They re-signed Tkachuk, which was a big question mark on the offseason. He was a UFA. No, was he an RFA? He was an RFA. So they got him re-signed. He got a new contract. But right now, Flames are in. Hopefully they can have a better playoffs than they did last year, getting knocked out in the first round. But Flames are in, and we'll see what happens if they can continue the success that they had last year. Next on my list is the Carolina Hurricanes. This might be a little unpopular opinion to some people, but I have them as an out. They made a lot of moves in the offseason. They brought a lot of people in. They got Hula from the Golden Knights. Edmondson with the trade for where did they just trade? Falk. They just traded Falk to St. Louis for Edmondson and a young prospect who won't be on the team right now. They signed Dzingel out of Columbus. They got Gardner out of Toronto, and they traded Reimer. They traded for Reimer out of Toronto for Scott Darling, pretty much his contract. Poor guy, couldn't stay healthy, got traded to Toronto. I'm pretty sure Toronto released him not too long after that. Rod the Bob Brindamore behind the coach definitely gave that team an edge, and they rode that, and they believed in him, and they bought into his system. So they definitely had a strong year last year. And a lot of times you see that. I mean, they had the storm surge, which was fun and everything all year, but they already said they're not doing that this year. It was a 1 year, energy thing. So if they can rekindle and find that energy and find that passion that they had last year behind Rod the Bod and the storm surge and a bunch of jerks, like everybody was kind of giving them the laughing stock of the NHL last year with like their antics and whatnot, but that drove them to be a playoff team. But I don't know if they can reciprocate that this year and have that same success that they did last year. So as of right now, they're an out for me. They are a brink out. I got 4 teams in the East that could all be, to come end of March, beginning of April, they could be leapfrogging each other for those final 2 spots. That's how close I think the East is going to be this year. East is going to be strong. So they're out right now, but that my mind could change throughout the season. So my next team on the list, the Chicago Blackhawks. Chicago Blackhawks are an out. they're still a couple years away from being a playoff team. They got a new coach in there. They're still learning his system, I feel. They signed Leonard from the Islanders. They got rid of Cam Ward. They still got Corey Crawford, and they got Colin Delia, which I was really surprised that the Blackhawks signed Leonard, where they had Colin Delia, who was the number one starter for a good portion of the season last year. And I thought this would be the year that he would get the nod to be not even just the backup to Crawford, but even fight Crawford for that number one spot. Now Delia's got to fight Crawford and Leonard. Even though Leonard had a remarkable season last year, he's another one. Can he continue the success that he had last year? He's in a whole new system. He's now with the Blackhawks coming over from the Islanders, where the Islanders were a very stout defensive team, where the Blackhawks defense is getting a little older. So can that continue? So there's a lot of question marks in Chicago. Can the older defense, keep up with the younger speed of the NHL now? Can, some of this younger talent like Doc and Nylander, Quinville, can these younger guys step up and kind of be the replicas of the Patty Kanes and Jonathan Taves that they had when they were younger? There's too many question marks for me to say that Chicago's in, so they're an out for me right now. Again, we'll see what happens throughout the season. I know I watched their last preseason game and they got roped by the Bruins, but they had a lot of their AHL players in, so it's tough to kind of tell by preseason. I don't really put a lot of weight on preseason, but it kind of gives you a good idea, a good look of where teams could go. But Blackhawks are an out. The Colorado Avalanche are an in. They were a playoff team last year. No question why they can't be a playoff team again this year. I feel like they can continue on what they were building last year. I know they got Nazem Kadri from the Toronto Maple Leafs in a trade for Tyson Barrie. Kadri is a good third line player. He's a good, depth guy. He's a solid bottom six player that you want for your team. Yes, he has some dumb moments, and it tends to be just against the Boston Bruins in the playoffs. But if he can, and even the coach, not even the coach, the GM, Joe Sakic even said, they asked him how were they going to handle Kadri in the playoffs, and they go, we're not going to play against the Boston Bruins, which is kind of a joke because Kadri the last two seasons got suspended in the playoffs against the Bruins for having some poorly antics. But the Avalanche are in for me. I know they lost Soderberg, they lost Tyson Barrie, but they got Cale Makar, who came in right off of a national championship game. Unfortunately, they lost. And stepped right into the playoffs with the Avalanche, and he looked like he was playing with that team all year. But I would like to see how he holds up in an 82-game season where the collegiate season is a lot shorter than the NHL. So that's a big question mark, Cale Makar, but I think he's a great player, and I think he'll be able to fit in, and I think he'll be able to handle the next stepping stone of his career. But the Colorado Avalanche, they have a very good defensive team. Their team is very good defensively, so I think their defense is going to help them. Grubauer, I think, is the goaltender that could take them to the next step. We saw Grubauer a couple of years ago in Washington, which helped Washington make it into the playoffs. And then, he got replaced by Holtby, and Holtby kind of took him down the stretch to win the cup. But he is a Stanley Cup winner, Grubauer. He has that experience. So I think he could take that experience with the Avalanche and bring them to the next level and bring them into the playoffs. They beat the Calgary Flames in the first round. 4-1 games, and then they ended up losing to the Sharks the next round, but they did make good strides, and I think they can continue that this year. So the Avalanche are an in for me, and their big question mark this year, though, is if they can't sign Rantanen, they might be an out. I think Rantanen is that much of an important piece of their roster. But if they could sign him and get him in the lineup and get him to be where he was last year, they'll be a playoff team. If they don't sign him, I think he's a big enough piece of that team that they could be out. So, but as of right now, I'm saying Avalanche in. They don't sign Rantanen, Avalanche out. So, next team on my list, the Columbus Blue Jackets. They had a wonderful playoffs last year. They made it to the second round. Unfortunately, they ended up losing to, yes, once again, my Boston Bruins. They played the Bruins really tough in that series. If honestly, I think if they got past the Bruins, they were going to go to the Cup Finals themselves. But they lost a lot of pieces this year. Bobrovsky left, Panarin left, Duchesne left, Dzingel left. We know Dzingel went to the Carolina Hurricanes. Bobrovsky went to the Florida Panthers. Panarin went to the New York Rangers. Duchesne went to the Nashville Predators. So they lost a lot of pieces. So there's too many question marks. I know they signed Gustav Nyquist, who was a former Red Wing, then got traded to the Sharks at the trade deadline last year. Now signed as a free agent with the Columbus Blue Jackets. I know they're getting. I mean, they got some young, talented D with Seth Jones and Murray, but their goaltending is a huge question mark. Huge question mark. Nobody knows who the starting goaltender is going to be. And they got two guys that they're going to split time with, but are they going to be able to pick up the slack are those guys going to be able to step in the shoes that Bobrovsky left? Even those two combined, you can put them both in the net, but I don't know if they're going to be the same as Bob. And also the scoring, they're not going to have the Duchesnes, the Dzingels, the Panarins to be putting the puck in the net that they were doing so frequently throughout the playoffs. So that's another big question mark. I just think there's too many question marks for me to say that the Blue Jackets are in, so they are an out for me. The Dallas Stars are definitely an in. They ended up getting knocked out by the eventual Stanley Cup champions, the St. Louis Blues, but they added Joe Pavelski from the San Jose Sharks. They added Corey Perry, but who's going to be missing a little bit? Corey Perry is going to miss the beginning of the season due to an injury that he got during training camp / preseason. But adding Pavelski, I mean, you got Pavelski along with Sagan and Jamie Benn and Radulov, and they got that young rookie there who stepped up big in the playoffs. Their defense is pretty strong. I mean, if Ben Bishop has another year like he did last year, I mean, that team can go real deep, and be a team that they haven't really kind of seen go deep into the playoffs like they have since the 90s of the Modano days. And so I think they're building in the right direction. They're moving in the right direction, and they're going to be a strong team in the West there. Pretty sure that they were a wild card team at the end of the year. I think they could fight and be a solid divisional team, be in the top three of the divisional teams that make the playoffs. I think they're better than being a wild card team. I know last year they had some antics where the owner or the GM called their top stars, Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin, out, and those guys kind of took that and rode with it. They ran with it, and they brought that team to the playoffs, got them to the second round, and eventually ended up losing to the St. Louis Blues. But they actually, was it the second round or the third round? But they end up losing to the St. Louis Blues, and that kind of was it. But the Dallas Stars definitely in. Detroit Red Wings are out. Detroit Red Wings have a lot of question marks. They just brought Steve Yzerman back. Stevie Y is back in Detroit. We've seen what he's done with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So if he can replicate that and do that with the Detroit Red Wings, then the Red Wings might be in good shape in a few years down the road. As of right now, they got way too many question marks on forward and defense and goaltending. As much as I'm a big Jimmy Howard fan, I don't know if he's going to be the guy to bring them to the promised land. I mean, they got some good young guys in Detroit, but they don't have enough pieces to really kind of push them to be a playoff team. They still need to rebuild that team back from what they've had. I mean, they were the longest running playoff team in the NHL until up to 3 seasons ago. I mean, them losing Zetterberg and Lidstrom retiring, and then Nicholas Cronwell retiring. He lost a lot of those guys that were, the next wave that stepped up now, but they don't really have that next wave after those guys to kind of step up. They got Dylan Larkin and Athanasio, but those guys, those two can't do it on their own. You need more pieces than that. So the Red Wings are out. They're a few years out. Hopefully Steve Yzerman can turn that team around and bring them back to the playoffs. But as of right now, they are out. The Edmonton Oilers, they got the old Red Wings GM, Ken Holland, comes into Edmonton, hopefully to kind of fix that team. Peter Chiarelli kind of put that team in shambles. We've seen him do it with the Bruins, he did it with Edmonton, and so hopefully Ken Holland will be able to fix that. As we mentioned earlier with the Calgary that Neil got traded to Edmonton out of Calgary, and then Talbot got traded out of Edmonton for Mike Smith. So if Mike Smith could be the goaltender for Edmonton that he was at the end of the season with Calgary, I think Edmonton is going to be a better team. They might be a brink team. They could be one of those brink teams in the West that could just either squeak somebody out for a playoff spot or just miss it, and then they could be there the next year. I mean, they still got Connor McDavid. They got Draisaitl. I mean, if James Neal can kind of step up and have a season like he did a couple of years ago. I know last year wasn't really the best year for Neal. He's come back from an injury. He made it to the Stanley Cup Finals a few years in a row. That's a lot of toll on a player. So he kind of had like a down year. But if he can come back to where he was 2-3 years ago and play like that for Edmonton, even play on a line with, Connor McDavid, kind of take over that Lucci role where James Neal is a little more skilled, a little more speed that could help McDavid out a little bit more, and be able to contribute on that line and get some goals. That would be a good help for the Oilers. And if Mike Smith could be their goaltending that they've been looking for years now, it's just they could be that brink team, but I'm still calling them an out. I don't see them in as a playoff team as of right now. The Florida Panthers, they got their goaltender. They signed Bobrovsky. Out of Columbus. He was a free agent this year. Gave him a big ticket. They're a young team. They just missed the playoffs last year. They got Coach Quenneville, as their head coach now, where we've seen what he's done with the Chicago Blackhawks over the years. I mean, I think they're putting the right pieces together. And I'm calling the Florida Panthers in. I think they're going to be a playoff team. They're going to be that team that either pushes out, the Hurricanes or the Islanders as that next spot to get a playoff spot. They're one of those 4 teams that I think are going to be jockeying each other at the end of the year to get those final 2 playoff spots. So the Panthers are in. I think they got the right pieces, and we'll just have to see. But I think the Panthers are going to be a very strong team in the East this year, and watch out for them. The Los Angeles Kings are out. Don't really know what they're doing over there. It's been very quiet from what I could see. I think they need a whole new shakeup. They need some of those young talent players to kind of start to shine. I mean, you still got your Kopitar, Anze Kopitar. You got your Drew Doughty. I mean, I think who knows what's going on with Kovalchuk? Is he still there? Is he going back to the KHL? That guy doesn't know what he's doing. Jonathan Quick, still a great goaltender, but he's also dealt with some injury issues over the last few years. So if he can stay healthy, there's too many question marks in LA. They're in out. I think they're gonna be kind of a bottom of the league team. There's too many questions. They got way too much work to do to kind of turn that organization, turn that team around to be back into the playoffs. So we saw them the last couple of years, but it's just not there yet. So for me right now, the Kings are out. Minnesota Wild also an out. Billy Guerin. I hope that guy can go in there and clean that organization up. apparently it was last year was an absolute mess. Some of those trades that were made. Billy Guerin, you got some work to do over there, bud. I hope he can really clean that up and bring Minnesota to the playoffs. But even if he does bring Minnesota to the playoffs, getting to the playoffs should not be, obviously getting to the playoffs isn't every team's end goal. Every team wants to win the Stanley Cup. But the Minnesota Wild need to make the playoffs and win a playoff round. That's where they need to start first. Columbus Blue Jackets, that was a big thing for them for the last few years. The Columbus Blue Jackets won a round last year. Now the Minnesota Wild need to do that. They need to win a round, but they need to find the pieces and get things more structured in Minnesota. And I think Bill Guerin's the guy to do it. I think he can come in, he can clean that team out. It's going to take a couple years. So Minnesota Wild fans, don't jump on Bill right away where you guys don't see the playoffs this year and you guys are not, you guys are out, you're not in, you're not even contending for a spot come February. But you got to give him time. You guys got the goaltender, Devin Dubnyk. You got some older contracts on your roster that you might need to move out, get some younger guys in. You guys got Ryan Donato last year, who is a very offensive player. But if he can learn to play all three assets of the game, he'll definitely be a more rounded player. But Minnesota out, and hopefully in the next couple of years, they could be a playoff team and win a playoff round. That's and make a nice deep run into the playoffs. Montreal Canadiens, they're one of those teams that are going to be jockeying at the end, but as right now they're an out. There's too many question marks. Can Carey Price stay healthy all year? Can Shea Weber stay healthy all year? I know they had some young stars that were really shining towards the end of the year. That when they weren't a playoff team, can they continue to show that success that they were showing at the end of the year? And a big question mark that always tends to happen, and it happened in Boston when he was the coach of Boston, is will Claude Julien trust those younger players? I mean, I love Claude. Claude did great things in Boston. He won a cup with the Bruins. But will Claude trust those younger players, or will he continue to rely on his veteran players and lean on them to kind of carry, the blunt of the work? And that generally tends to hurt teams. It's a faster league. It's only getting faster. These kids are getting younger and faster every year. So you need those young guys to step up. But if you don't trust them, they're not going to be able to grow and step up and be able to be the players that you want them to be. So if the young talent can shine through, Weber and Price can stay healthy, and can Claude trust them, they will be an in team. But right now I got them as an out because that's too many question marks in my book for them to be an in team. So right now the Montreal Canadiens are an out. Nashville Predators are an in. They were the best team the second to best team in the West last year. I think they were the top of the Central. They got Matt Duchene. They did trade away PK Subban to the Devils. Instead of the big four on D, they got the big three. They still got Yossi, Ellis, and Ekholm. But that's still three solid defensemen. If you compare them with capable guys to hold that other spot, I mean they'll be great. I just think that signing of Duchene really strengthens the Nashville Predators right down the middle. I think they have a great team. There was no question of them not making the playoffs. The big question mark is when they get into the playoffs is, can Pekka Rinne raise his game to bring them back to the Stanley Cup and hopefully potentially win the Stanley Cup this year. But the Nashville Predators, if Rinne could do that, are my Stanley Cup team coming out of the West. So right now I got Predators not only in, but making it to the Stanley Cup final. I don't have them winning it, but I got them going to the Stanley Cup final. Next team is the New Jersey Devils. We just talked about PK Subban got traded to the Devils. The Devils also had the number 1 draft pick, and they drafted Jack Hughes, who in the preseason, like I said before, I don't hold a lot of clout in the preseason, but he looked really good in the preseason. He's definitely going to be on that starting roster come day one. So they got Jack Hughes. They traded for PK Subban, and they also signed Wayne Simmons, who is a great third line player, good grit guy who will be able to be, that kind of that gritty motivator in that bottom six, or even potentially could be a top six player. I'd say top 9 player, Wayne Simmons. So it was a good addition to the team. My question mark for the New Jersey Devils is if Corey Schneider and Mackenzie Blackwood can both stay healthy and both have an even split so they can stay healthy throughout the year, they'll help bring that team to the next level. So the Devils aren't in right now for me, but they are one of those teams that will be jockeying for that final 2 wildcard spots at the end of the year. So I got the Devils as the New Jersey Devils are in it. All right, my next team, the New York Islanders. New York Islanders are an out for me last year. They surprised a lot of people last year. Barry Trotz came in and changed that chemistry, that, swagger, however you want to call it, in that team last year. They went from giving up the most goals one year to letting up the most goals in 1 year. Robin Leonard and Thomas Greiss were a great 1-2 punch, but they didn't re-sign Leonard, and they got Varlamov from the Colorado Avalanche. And I don't think Varlamov is going to be that strong as a goaltender to have that clean split like Leonard and Greiss did last year. They still got Greiss, so maybe they'll lean a little more on Greiss this year than Varlamov. But I don't know if those two can really pull it. And I don't know if the Islanders can rekindle what they did last year and be a playoff team. I know Barry Trotz has a very good track record of having playoff teams. I think the only team that he hasn't made the playoffs with was the Nashville Predators, and that's when they first became a team in the organization. But Barry Trotz and the Islanders team, we see years and years before they would be a playoff team, and then they'll miss the next year. They're kind of, 1 year to the next are very different on what is going on. So right now I got the Islanders as an out. They're not even one of those teams I think jockeying. I think they're just a clean out. Next is the New York Rangers. New York Rangers, along with the New Jersey Devils, made a lot of transactions over the offseason. They have the number 2 pick in the draft, and they drafted the New York Rangers had the 2nd pick, and they drafted Capo Caco, which I think he'll definitely crack the starting day roster. I didn't really get to catch him during the preseason, but what I saw from him in the World Juniors is I think he'll be a good player to be in the NHL. They also signed the Breadman and Terry Panarin out of Columbus, and also they traded for Jacob Trouba. So they got a stout defenseman. They got 2 goal scorers in Capo and Panarin to add on to what they already had on the roster. They were they just missed it last year. They made the Rangers did it right. They tanked. They rebuilt the whole roster. They traded away Jimmy Vesey, traded away Kevin Hayes, and they're kind of building pretty much a brand new team. They're building in with trades in the draft, and they still got Henrik Lundqvist in net. And I think this is going to be kind of his last chance to win a cup. So that's why the New York Rangers aren't only in, but they are my dark horse to win the Stanley Cup. You heard it here first. They are my dark horse to win the Stanley Cup. I even tweeted it as soon as they signed Panarin that the Rangers are my dark horse to win the Cup. I'm kind of hoping I'm wrong and the Boston Bruins win the Stanley Cup, what would you say? But the New York Rangers are my dark horse to win the Cup. So not only are they in the playoffs, they're going to meet the Nashville Predators in the finals, and they're going to beat the Predators in 6 games. New York Rangers, 6 games, Stanley Cup champions. You hear it here. And if I am right, I'll buy a Lundqvist jersey. You heard it here. Right here first. All right, next team, Ottawa Senators. They're in a full rebuild. Full rebuild. There was a lot of turmoil in the Ottawa organization the last couple of years. they've made some signings over the year, but we don't really know what they're going to look like until we start seeing regular season games. But they could be a team that surprises you. They got some pieces, but again, you don't really know what they're going to be like until you see. I mean, they still got Craig Anderson in net, who's a good goaltender. But, like, it's just, you don't really know what you're going to be looking at until you see it on the ice. And right now, the Senators are an out for me. It's just too many question marks. But they could surprise you because everyone's probably thinking that they are the laughing stock of the NHL right now. They're going to be the worst team, yada, yada, yada. But so they could take that bulletin board material and run with it and shock everyone and actually be a contending team. But as of right now, before the season even starts, I'm saying the Ottawa Senators are an out. Next on my list are the Philadelphia Flyers as well. They are also an out. The Philadelphia Flyers are also an out for me. They're going to be one of those teams that are jockeying for a final playoff spot. They're moving in the right direction. They finally got their goaltender in Carter Hart. They signed Kevin Hayes, gave him a nice little ticket. They got Braun out of San Jose. He's a good depth defenseman. They're putting the pieces together. They got the guys that they need to be a playoff team. I want to say that they're in, but there's too many teams that I've done my research on that are a little bit ahead of them. So it's going to come down to how they play throughout the year, and if they can sustain it, then they'll definitely be a playoff team. But before the season even starts, I'm saying the Flyers are an out. Next, Pittsburgh Penguins. I got them as an in. They got Galchenyuk from Arizona in the trade for Phil Kessel, as we mentioned before. I think that they can put the pieces together and return to the playoffs. I don't see them going far again. It could be another first round exit, but I think they'll be a playoff team. It would surprise me if they don't make the playoffs. But Matt Murray, if he can kind of go back to his ways that he was when they won those cups, he's kind of been struggling a little bit the last couple seasons. I know he's dealt with injury issues, so if he can stay healthy or even, make it to the play, or if he can stay healthy and play at his, top peak that we've seen him play at, and then the defense can kind of step up and be what they're supposed to be, I think that he will be, the Penguins will definitely be a playoff team, and they'll they still got Sidney Crosby, still got Evgeny Malkin, they got Gunsel, who always tends to shine in the playoffs, but the Penguins are in. That's it. Penguins in. The San Jose Sharks, they really haven't changed much over the last year. They re-signed Erik Karlsson. They still got Carlson and Burns on D. Martin Jones has been a question mark and will continue to be a question mark. Is he the guy that's going to be able to bring them to the finals? We see him have his ups and downs every year. The Jumbo Joe's back for another year. They did lose Joe Pavelski. Not sure if Patrick Marleau re-signed with them or not. I can't remember. I think he did. But they were a playoff team last year. They almost were on their way to the Stanley Cup Finals. They lost to the St. Louis Blues in the Western Conference Finals. So definitely playoff team. They're in for me, and we'll just have to wait and see how deep they actually go. Can Martin Jones be the goaltender that's going to bring them to the finals? We know they got the pieces on defense and offense to get there, but can Jones close that door and bring him to that next step? What do we got next? St. Louis Blues, your Stanley Cup champion. St. Louis Blues are an in for me. Are in. The Stanley Cup Blues are in. They didn't really lose much. I know Patrick Maroon signed with the Tampa Bay Lightning. They traded Joel Edmondson, but they got Falk in from Carolina. Not really too many changes. Goaltending will be a question mark. I know Bennington only played half of the year last year. Let's see how he does playing the full year. Can he continue on what he was doing last year? Do I look nervous? You know, the whole 9 yards. Can he keep up that can he keep up the persona and continue riding it next year? We'll just have to wait and see how he does this year. But the St. Louis Blues are going to be in, and we'll see how much of a toll of winning the Stanley Cup actually put on them. So, on to our next team is the next team, Tampa Bay Lightning. We all know what happened. They were the best team in the NHL last year, and then they got swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets in 4 games. They're going to be in for me. They'll make the playoffs, but I don't see them repeating being the best team in the NHL again as they did last year. I think they need to work on more of, you know, going deep in the playoffs rather than being the best team in the NHL. Yes, you get a nice little reward for being the best team in the NHL, but you become the laughing stock if you get swept in the first round. So therefore, I mean, they still got Stamkos, they got Kucherov, they got Vasilevsky in that. I mean, they're a very deep team. They got a lot of skill and a lot of skill players. It's just they got to continue that to the playoffs. I feel like they went into those playoffs going against Columbus and thought it was going to be a cakewalk, and Columbus punched them in the mouth and punched their ticket to the next round. So I got Tampa Bay in, not going to be the best team in the NHL. Not really too sure who will be the best team. Maybe another one later down on my list. But Lightning in, and as long as they can kind of continue what they did last year's regular season, it'll be an easy in for them. Toronto Maple Leafs. They are going to be a playoff team. They re-signed Mitchell Marner before the season started, so Marner is in the lineup. They got Tyson Barrie coming out of Colorado, so they got another good goaltender. They added Muzzin at the end of last year. They let Jake Gardiner go, who signed with the Carolina Hurricanes, but I think the Maple Leafs finally are getting the defense that they've been waiting and been looking for to bring them to the next level. The defense has been slacking. We all know that they got the offensive power to be able to do what they want to do with Matthews and Nylander and Jonathan Taves and Mitch Marner. I mean, they got the offensive talent to be able to put the goals in, but their struggles were kind of more Frederik Andersen kind of getting, you know, hung out to dry by the defense because the defense wasn't as talented as they needed it to be to, you know, make that deep run. I know they got knocked out by the Boston Bruins in the first round last year, but I think the Maple Leafs are going to be the best team in the NHL this year. With their additions that they had, they definitely added by subtraction. I mean, they got rid of Kadri, so they're not going to have to worry about that headache if they have to play the Boston Bruins once again in the playoffs. The same thing with Jake Gardiner, who was the last 2 years a -4 in both Game 7s in the Garden against the Bruins. So, you know, I feel like those two pieces kind of hurt the Maple Leafs in that first round of the playoffs, especially going against the Bruins. I mean, some players just kind of have, you know, mental handcuffs on them when they play certain teams. So I think them kind of removing them, getting prepared to have to play the Boston Bruins once again in the playoffs. But I think the Maple Leafs will be the best team in the NHL this year. I do not think that they'll have a collapse like the the Tampa Bay Lightning did last year, but I think they will be the best team in the NHL, but I don't see them winning the Cup. Like I mentioned earlier, I got the New York Rangers as my dark horse, but Maple Leafs in. Vancouver Canucks, they're moving in the right direction. They got Quinn Hughes, which is Jack Hughes' older brother. He came in at the end of last year. Elias Pettersson, who was the Rookie of the Year last year. They're getting the young talent to come in with like Bo Horvat and Besser. Like they got the guys that are coming in and stepping into the lineup. I think they're 1 year away from making the playoffs. I think if they have a solid year this year, Markstrom and Ned, if he can have a big year, I think they could be definitely a playoff team in the next couple of years. I just don't think they're at that. They're not ready to make that jump over the hump to make the playoffs. They're gonna be right there at the end, along with Edmonton, to make that last final spot. But as of right now, I have the Vancouver Canucks as an out. Vegas Golden Knights, I got them as an in. They've impressed the last 2 seasons. Why not continue rolling with them? They got their pieces at the end of last year. We all know how their season ended last year. We don't have to go over that again. They would be. We don't have to go over that. So the Vegas Golden Knights, they're in. They didn't really lose much. If Fleury could stay biggest thing, goaltending could stay healthy. If Fleury could stay healthy and drive them to another, Stanley Cup playoff promise and potentially have a nice long run in the Stanley Cup playoffs again, I think the Vegas Golden Knights are going to be an exciting team to watch once again this year. Washington Capitals. The Washington Capitals, they are coming off of losing to the Hurricanes in the first round in double overtime and Game 7. They're gonna come back to make it to the playoffs again and not have another first round exit. We've seen what happens when they get past the first round. They make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. So they make it to the finals and they won. So now they just need to get back into the playoffs, which I think they're a playoff team. They didn't really lose much. They still got Ovechkin. They still got Holtby. They still got Carlson, Oshie. You know all the names. You know the players. There wasn't really too much, moving pieces in that organization. So I think they're going to continue rolling with the chemistry that they got, and they're going to be a playoff team once again. Last but not least, the Winnipeg Jets is our final team number 31. And I have them as an out. Even though they were in last year, I don't think they're going to make it this year. They've lost a lot of pieces. They traded for Kevin Hayes right at the trade deadline. Kevin Hayes signed with the Philadelphia Flyers. Trouba went to the New York Rangers. We don't even know if Dustin Byfuglien's coming back. He stepped away from the team, so we don't really know what's going on there. Tyler Myers went to Vancouver. There's a lot of pieces that kind of moved out of Vancouver, which is going to kind of handcuff them a little bit, kind of struggle them. They still got Vasilevsky, but their defense really took a hit this year with all that, a lot of their players moving. I mean, they still got Patrick Laine and Blake Wheeler, but can those guys? We don't really know what those guys can do. They got Mark Scheifele, but I mean, is Laine going to disappear again for 3 months like he did last year, or he's going to continue to play and be the top player in the NHL that we expected him to be coming in the same year that Austin Matthews did? So we've seen Austin Matthews can stay in it, but can Patrick Laine do that? And we saw that last year where, I don't know if it was a sophomore slump or whatnot, but he kind of just disappeared. So hopefully Laine can come back this year and have a full season of being a top player like we want him to be, would like to see him to be. But as of right now, I get the Winnipeg Jets as an out. I feel like they just lost too many pieces that helped them get in last year, and we'll just have to wait and see. So that is all 31 teams. We can do a quick rundown of every one. We got Anaheim Ducks out, Arizona Coyotes in, Boston Bruins in, Buffalo Sabres out, Calgary Flames in, Carolina Hurricanes out, Chicago Blackhawks out, Colorado Avalanche in, Columbus Blue Jackets out, Dallas Stars in, Detroit Red Wings out, Edmonton Oilers out, Florida Panthers in, Los Angeles Kings out, Minnesota Wild out, Montreal Canadiens out, Nashville Predators in, New Jersey Devils in, New York Islanders out, New York Rangers in, Ottawa Senators out, Philadelphia Flyers out, Pittsburgh Penguins in, San Jose Sharks in, St. Louis Blues in, Tampa Bay Lightning in, Toronto Maple Leafs in, Vancouver Canucks out, Vegas Golden Knights in, Washington Capitals in, and Winnipeg Jets out. So that is all 31 teams. Those are my ins and outs of the NHL season 2019-2020. We're going to do more videos like this throughout the year. We're going to talk more actual NHL hockey. If you want to talk more NHL the video game, or even talk hockey, make sure you head over to my Twitch, Big Country 7914 on Twitch. Go over and give me a follow. Turn the notifications on so you know when I go live. Like I said, I stream Tuesday, Thursday, Friday nights around 7 p.m. Eastern time. I also have an Instagram and Twitter, both big_country 7914. And if you you are looking for more NHL 20 content, especially hockey ultimate team content, me and fellow streamer Waba Plays, we're going to be doing a live podcast once a week on my Big Country 7914 Twitch channel. That we're going to talk everything hut, and any questions you have, you can ask them in the chat and we'll answer them live on it. If you do happen to miss that live stream, we are still putting it up on YouTube. You can go over to YouTube, search Hut Heads, and ask any questions in the comment section. Also comment here if there's any teams in the NHL you really want me to talk about this year. I'll try to do like a dissect of every single team. I kind of hit them quick during this video, but I can go into more depth if that's something you guys want to see. So make sure you comment below. Make sure you give me a like, subscribe, turn that bell on. Once again, I'm Big Country. I stream over at Twitch, Big Country 7914. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Everything will be posted below. I hope you all have a great day. And remember, shoot, score, happy.